Welcome to the Layman's Seminary. Today I'm preparing for my debate with Kabane, which is in 3 days. He's Eastern Orthodox and I'm Free Grace for those that don't know. And so basically what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be hyping myself up, hyping y'all up, that type of thing, looking into some stuff about Kabane as far as his work, some of my stuff. Then I'm going to start giving a presentation that if I had uh, a lot of time to give, I would give for defense of my argument. That way, whatever falls short in my presentation, y'all can always go back and watch this. So yeah, let's begin. So the topic of the debate is justification by faith alone. Okay, it's going to be on Standing for Truth's channel. So this is the structure as of now. Now this may change, but this seems to be the agreed structure that we have. So there's going to be 15-minute opening statements. That means I got to cut things down to 15 minutes, right? Then there's going to be a rebuttal section for both of us, right? 10-minute rebuttals, I think it is. Then there's going to be a 30-minute cross-examination where each one of us gets 15 minutes each. He leads and then I lead, or however the structure goes. Then there's going to be another rebuttal period, and so this is interesting. I don't think I've ever done one of these before where you have additional rebuttals. I think I've done some informal stuff like that, but not formal. And then there's going to be 25 minutes of questions and answers in the audience. And then there's going to be 5-minute closing statements. So it's going to be kind of interesting. But I'm looking forward to this debate structure here. So this is his CV, Seraphim Hamilton's CV that's at Academia EDU. And I found out about this because I was talking to an Eastern Orthodox guy, and he told me, he had a pretty impressive CV there. And so you see University of Notre Dame, right? And so right there you have, you also have, he went to Duke, and he has a THM in theology, and he got that in 2021. So he's pretty fresh out of seminary, but he's been working on stuff for a while. He's even got a master's of arts from Notre Dame, and in early Christian studies from 2019, and his BA he finished in 2017. And so he's been right at it from, he's been constantly at it, and that's why these ideas are fresh in his head. He's sharp. He talks a lot about biblical theology and all that. I'm about 11 credits short of a THM and 3 credits short of an MBS, Master's of Biblical Studies. But anyway, so here we go. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg as far as his CV. He's taught debate, he's taught classes as a adjunct professor and other things like that. So you can go check it out. This is impressive. 14 years ago, at the age of 16, there's his videos dealing with apologetics and stuff. And also what's impressive is, and the comments at the bottom, he's evaluating himself, thinking that, he was prideful or things like that. And so I commend him in a lot of ways, probably in ways that I can't commend him in the actual debate because there won't be enough time. But oh, great. I got to move this around. So this is my Academia EDU. And I don't have, my papers are a mess. They really are. They're not good papers. They're really not. Not because I didn't get good grades on them. It's just the organization, the abbreviations, things like that. They're just not where they should be, But I'm hoping that I can take all of this and make a good thesis for whenever I graduate. What you'll notice is, just like Kabane, I'm extremely interested in biblical theology, okay, which is different from systematic theology. I have videos on doing theology that go into detail more about that. Right here, this experiential sanctification, a concept I constantly talk about in Galatians 3, and its relationship to the Abrahamic covenant and the Mosaic covenant and the church. These are passages that typically Protestant Reformed people will bring up in the debates defending for justification. But I'm just showing you, I view these related to experiential sanctification. Okay. And this one, three-dimensional fellowship approach to biblical systematic theology. I developed a lot of stuff of experiential sanctification, passages that people think is about salvation in the Old Testament. But this is probably the one right here I want y'all to focus on more than anything else. Because typically Protestants will argue Genesis 15 is when Abraham got saved, right? Well, this is my paper that I wrote for Intermediate Hebrew 2. And as you see from the title, Genesis 15 in the context of experiential sanctification and experiential justification. Okay. So we're going to talk a lot about that today, and that's going to be very significant. Also, and when I took Advanced Greek 2, I wrote the Doctrine of Sanctification in Romans. And so you're going to see, I don't view Romans 4 the way the typical Protestant Reformed person views it. As you know, I'm free grace, so that's part of that. Okay, let's go to another one. So I got some redundant articles in here because I still don't know how to use academia properly. But this is my Advanced Greek 1 article on the presence or absence of verbal aspect in the substantive participle. So this all relates to all the claims about John 3:16 and continuous action and all that stuff. But this is actually traced in the Greek grammarians, and those passages are not brought up. It's dealing with it on the issue of the grammar. As you see here, this one, exploring the Abrahamic promise, is the introduction to Old Testament eschatology. So when I took eschatology class, I wrote my paper on Genesis 11:24 and 12:9. So you see, I'm doing a lot of work with passages that relate to Genesis 12:15, whether it's in Galatians, whether it's in Romans, and things like that. An introduction to a theology proper from Deuteronomy 6. This is about the Shema and theology proper. So there's stuff about sanctification in there. The meaning of worship and God with the mind in ministry. You know, there's other papers that I've written, but these are the ones that I've put up here so far. So here's one, the free grace, biblical, theological, sociological approach to ministering to people living in sinful lifestyles. That deals with Romans 1 and the typical approach that people take versus the free grace approach I take. Let's see. The basis for the dispensational premillennial faith. So I'm arguing about covenants, hermeneutics, things like that. Let's see here. This paper right here is what I wrote my Intermediate Hebrew 1 on. It's on Ruth 1-5. I wrote that. The Colossians paper right here, this was what I wrote for Greek exegetical methods. Colossians 1. This paper is one I actually wrote undergraduate for one of my sociology classes, social theory, I think. And I wrote it about, as you see, the dramaturgical analysis of the drama that is the Google Plus community. For those that know about Google Plus and Hangouts and stuff like that, you have that. And then this last one down here is not really a paper. It's a transcript / outline of my Matt Yester and I did a whole thing about 1 John 5:1, and we were going through Wallace and talking about the Greek grammar and stuff. And this became essentially why I chose to write my paper on the substantive participle whenever I took Advanced Greek 1. So that's back in 2017. I think this is 2016. So there's some stuff if you want more detail on how I think about certain things There was the full title of the exegetical paper I wrote, Paul's Preparatory Prayer, Polemic Hymn of Praise as Praxis for the Church. Got those P's alliterating going on. Okay, so these are the people that I've debated so far. And these categories may not be what you like, but this is how I have them. You got the conditional salvationists here, right? You got the non-free grace OSAS here. And then you got the free grace people that I've debated. And so the ones in green are, this is according to SFT's playlist, are the highest rating debates. And so the question is, why are these the highest rating debates? Well, David Preston's debate, one of the reasons it's the highest viewed, actually, well, I would say it, viewed debate in my playlist is because I think primarily the topic, it deals with salvation in the Old Testament. It deals with hyper-dispensationalism or, those issues like that. And also David is a worthy opponent, I mean, it's a good, we're both digging in with slides and information and things like that. So that was a very highly viewed video in comparison to the others. Another one that's highly viewed is my debate with Travis Thomas, who was Church of Christ. Travis is very entertaining, and it was a battle of the charts. He came in trying to defeat my charts, and he made his own charts, and it was just a really interesting debate. I don't think it was much of a challenge. It was a different kind of challenge. I'll put it that way. But I think the reason that one got so many views is because Travis has made a lot of enemies, with the Reformed Church of Christ and all that stuff. Sort of like A.K. Richardson. But so people watched it, that were Reformed. People watched it that were Free Grace. And of course, the Church of Christ also watched it. And, so that was interesting. The number 12, my 12th debate, the 2 versus 2, this is where Eli and I versus Dan Chapa and Turchavan went. Of course, that's a whole bunch of high profile people in all their audiences, and it's a good professional debate. So I could see why that's a highly viewed debate. And then the Kelly Powers debate. Kelly Powers, of course, brought his audience. Number 2, the topic of the issue. I'm calling it perseverance in the faith because that's essentially what he was arguing, that you can't apostatize. But anyway, and then of course the tactics that Kelly Powers used and how I handled those. That doesn't mean I handled them well. I think I won that debate, but I think that anyway, we live and we learn, right? I could go into that some other time. So you have the green ones, right? Then I got the yellow, kind of like going with a green, yellow, red idea, but actually I have blue in between. So then the second most viewed ones are like my debate with Daniel Mira, right? Wait, hold on. Which color did I pick? Yeah, my debate with Daniel Mira, which was my first debate. And it was pretty aggressive. It was pretty raw. And it's over the book of Hebrews. And so a lot of people have seen that, for whatever, to point out, certain things or whatever. So I understand that. Then when I debated David Preston again on James 2, once again, James 2 is a controversial passage. David Preston already, had developed an audience in a sense. I don't know if anybody is convinced by David Preston, but he's developed an audience. And him being hyper dispensationalist, taking that approach. I know he don't like that term, but it's best I'm gonna give him right now. So there's that. Then there was Richard Lee, who was Church of Christ, MDiv, and that was really kind of prep. I didn't know it at the time for my debate with Travis Thomas, but that I'm actually surprised. I think it was just because people wanting to know how to deal with Church of Christ watched that debate. That's the reason it was so high up there. CJ Cox, my debate with him on lordship. Of course, CJ already has been debating for a long time, so he's got fans, and of course, the lordship versus free grace thing is going to draw people in. Then my debate with Dr. Larry Helms, that was very controversial. It was not impressive. I'll put it that way. But there's many main reasons people made watch that one is because lordship versus free grace, but also the meme factor. I think the meme and the meme factor is probably what I would say. And then CJ Cox, whenever we debated James 2 on lordship, and once again, James 2 is always going to draw people in. Lordship issues going to draw people in, and then CJ's, of course, his audience. And so then Crimson Air, and I'm really surprised Crimson Air is not rating higher, because Crimson Air and I we battled the chart. Actually, what I did was I used the chart against him, but he gave arguments. He was very aggressive. That's a debate I think people should watch over and over again, to think about. Down here, the 13th debate, Lucas, is free grace biblical? That was an interesting debate. I'm surprised that one hasn't gotten much views. And I think part of the reason is usually what happens is these people that I debate, some of them will usually do an after show or debate review to evaluate things. And it's kind of interesting that Kelly Power, as far as I know, never done an extensive debate review. Maybe he did an after show. I can't remember. But I mean, there's some of these people that have debated me, and it seems like, I can't say for sure, but it seems like they've gone into retirement or moved into other things. Maybe they found out debating wasn't for them. I don't know. We'll wait and see. That's yet to be told. Just keep in mind that this color coding and how many views, that says more about the audience than it does about me. Well, I guess it says something about the audience, and it does say something about me and my opponent. Turchin Fan, I'm surprised people didn't watch that one more. I mean, I think Turchin Fan is usually so mellow and so professional that people don't just get excited, and so they don't tune in. And Dan Chapa's a similar way. I'm really surprised this is not highly viewed. This is a Hebrews warning passage that was very extensive. And I wish people that debate me would do that, because the people always bring up Hebrews 10, And then, of course, the free grace debates that I had, they were both eschatology. Matt First, replacement theology, and Pastor Tommy Mamerchi. So I'm not a strong voice when it comes to eschatology, not because I don't strongly believe in eschatology. I'm a free grace dispensationalist, premillennial, pre-trib, but that's not my focus. And so what you kind of see, now let's do something else. Let's put up the jerk factor. Okay. Who were the greatest jerks? All right. Now people can say I'm a jerk. Okay. That's not what, if you want to say I'm a jerk, that's fine. You can say that. But I just want to bring up the jerk factor into this evaluation. By far, let me think about this. Who was worse? Larry Helms or Kelly Powers? I don't know, but they're both jerks. So let's just go ahead, and the jerk factor is this Larry Helms. That's why it's in yellow. Okay. Kelly Powers, the jerk factor. Let's see what else. Who else was a jerk? Anybody else that was a jerk? Travis was a jerk, but he was a nice jerk. I mean, he's an entertaining jerk, I guess you could say. He wasn't a jerk to me. He was more of a jerk to his previous opponents and stuff. Okay. So there's the jerk factor, right? Now let's do a nice guy. Let's do a nice guy evaluation here. Nice guy. Who's the nice guy here? Richard Lee was nice, but of course he had an impediment. So he probably couldn't be aggressive even if he wanted to. He could be aggressive in his comments and replying to stuff. I think Lucas was nice. He had teeth, don't get me wrong, but he was nice. CJ's kind of in between. I mean, he's nice, but there was a lot of buildup, a lot of misrepresentation. So I'm just gonna make him a meh. So all right. Church and fan, definitely nice. Dan Chapa, nice. And of course, this was nice. This whole thing right here, this 2 versus 2 was nice. All right. CJ was moving from meh to nice, so we'll go ahead and put the nice factor on here for him. I think these were nice debates over here. Of course, I had to exercise a little bit more patience and use a different style because I can't fight eschatology like I'm fighting free grace. You know, it's just not the same thing. So what you're seeing here, let's go ahead and put some color to it again, is you're seeing that the jerk is in the green. Okay, there's one jerk in the green. Here's another nice jerk in the green. Okay. And then I wouldn't even call Crimson Air a jerk. I mean, David Preston's just a boxer. I'm not going to even call him a jerk. Mira was just my entrance into things. So you got jerk. Let's bring up this jerk. All right. Even though that's a yellow pattern, I think you're starting to see the issue here, guys. SFT's audience prefers and watches more, either for negative or for positive or what. They prefer the jerk debates. Okay. All I got to say is don't overlook the nice debates, you know, because you know where these are like all out Armageddon, you feel like, but sometimes they can be superficial because you're dealing with the jerk attitude, and you can't really get to all the issues. But like I said, Travis Thomas is a nice jerk, but Larry Helms and Kelly Powers definitely jerks. And some people maybe don't like the word jerk. I don't know what else to call them right now. I apologize for that. Let's see. Maybe I should have just said mean or naughty. Mean probably is a better term I should have used, but oh well, we're recording already. So yeah, the nice debates are like a Cold War. You got to pay attention to the moves and the plays and everything, or you'll miss certain things, you know. And this is not a perfect analysis, but this is something I'm keeping track of because I'm learning from my debate experiences, my opponents, and the audience's response. And I'm going to tell you this. Kabane, every time I've seen him debate, every time I've seen him communicate, every time I've seen him review things, teach in his writings, he's nice. But I believe that this debate between Kabane and I It's going to become the most viewed debate out of the whole entire playlist. And the reason I say that is because there's going to be a lot of EO people in the audience. And the EO might disagree with me, but I don't think they're going to be mad at me. There may be some that may want to debate me. There may be some that interact with me more in Discord or want clarification on certain issues. But I think they're going to respect the fact that I'm showing something, an alternative to what they're typically used to seeing in these debates between Protestant Reformed people, you know, Calvinists, Matt Slick, Anthony Rogers, others, you know. So this is my prediction. I think eventually this will become one of the most watched debates. Now, the other reason I think it's going to be most watched is because the Protestants are going to be watching it, because everybody's going to want to know, can I do better than Matt Slick? Can I do better than Anthony Rogers? And that's a big challenge, because both of those are knowledgeable and they have their own moves in particular areas. But I'm really making it a goal to communicate with my audience and also to communicate with Kabane, because there's things that I'm saying. Yeah, I'm sure Kabane has watched my debate prep videos that I've been doing for him, and he's probably watched some other things. He's oriented himself a little bit to these things, but I don't expect him to get everything about free grace, you know, in particular my articulation of free grace. So the Protestants, the Calvinists, the Arminian are going to be in here. And you know what? The free grace are going to be here. And there may be some free grace people that challenge me on certain things. You know, I'm going to use a two-part thesis, a conservative and a theoretical one. And this is all going to help me in writing my papers and stuff. So I think this is going to be one for the book, one for the records, you know, something to learn from. My interaction with Kabane is going to be probably similar to my interaction with Turtafan and Dan Chapa, Matt First, and Tommy Mamerchi. My interaction with Mir was aggressive. That was my first debate. My interaction with David Preston was chill until I saw him trying to lay traps, and then it got more aggressive. Crimson Air, about the same. Where's Preston again? So, you know, I adapt to my opponent, okay? So I really expect, as they say, a good, clean fight, right? It's going to be something that I think is going to generate research, generate questions, get people talking, you know, may lead to people making videos, responses, and things like that. I think it is going to be a nice guy debate. So let me clear that. All right, moving on. So the issue is that when we're talking about justification by faith alone, there's a whole lot that we got to talk about before we even give this argument. And to use some of Kabane's language, Seraphim's language, there's whole structures or frames of reference tied to these words, justification and faith, you know. So before we begin, this is from Bible Framework. So what you'll see here, and I'll talk about Bible Framework more in the future and everything, Charlie Clough's stuff, 2 classes that are offered at Schaefer that are really good. But essentially, you plug in exegesis, okay? And you got your biblical theology, and you got your systematic theology, and then you got pressures from paganism and syncretism, and you're confronting it. So the framework approach tries to, when it conveys truth, it tries to show you how it's all linked together. And how, because what happens is, if I just throw out a individual piece of truth and I don't relate it to the framework, then that little piece of truth gets swallowed up. Okay, and we're going to come back to that whole swallowed up thing in a minute. Okay. So I'm looking at how this is, what this looks like in full screen. I guess it'll be all right. So we got justification by faith alone debate at the top. So my thesis, and I got to make this explicit because, you know, I've been accused before of not having a clear thesis or not stating a thesis. And I don't believe that that was founded, but still, the thesis is justification is by faith alone in the sense that free grace theology means that. Okay. Notice that I'm not talking about how Calvinists or Protestants or evangelical, whatever term you want to use. I'm talking about it in the sense that free grace theology means that. The reason I bring that up is because Kabane knew when he was agreed to debate me that he's debating free grace. This means that this is something new, something challenging, something different than what he's dealt with before, as far as I know. And hopefully that's appealing to him as an academic and stuff. The theological thesis. So the point is, this is a theological thesis. Okay, we're dealing with theology, biblical and systematic. And so it's not merely exegetical. That's very important to understand, because some of these other guys that debated Kabane and other Greek Orthodox, they think that, oh, well, all we got to do is bring in exegesis. Well, the problem is that exegesis is typically based on immediate context and book context, okay? But Kabane's arguments are related to biblical and systematic theology. And so if you just throw bits and pieces of stuff out there and you try to argue for that and everything, he's just going to swallow it up, you know, or he's going to cause enough, I guess, reasonable doubt to make a person wonder about this. So the conservative thesis that I'm going to be arguing is that God positionally justifies the ungodly as the ungodly, okay? And so what this is basically saying is that when God justifies, positionally justifies is a term I'm going to use, and I'll clarify that as we go. He's not justifying somebody who's been made righteous, who's participated in the life of God, who's been indwelt, who's done all of that stuff. The scriptures describe it as God justifying the ungodly. So that seems to indicate that justification occurs, I guess you say, logically first, before ontological transformation. You know, I have questions about that. I honestly do. And I'm open to read, and you probably have seen it from my debate preparation and stuff. So I need to think about how I can say this conservative thesis in a way that doesn't cast doubt on that thesis, because that's not my primary thesis in this debate. But support for this thesis is that there are some aorist participles that are used to describe basically the condition of a person as they were before they got saved or when Christ died. And so that's the support for that. Now for the theoretical thesis, and this is just an overview of where we're going. This is not the exposition of it, if you will. The theoretical thesis that will help roll into my THM thesis is that all the passages Kabane mentions, that's my assumption, he may throw me off, are experiential justification passages. Okay. So that's going to be interesting. We'll see if that works. So both of these theses, the conservative and the theoretical, are free grace. See, the thing is, this debate's about justification by faith alone. And free grace is the most faith alone position that you can take. We believe one moment of faith in Christ gives us the eternal results of eternal life. Also, we're going to be arguing in this debate that free grace has the greatest explanatory power as a model. So here we got two ships fighting, and we're going to give EO the benefit of the doubt. We got EO on one side, and we got Protestant theology, non-free grace on the other side, taking a lot of hits. So the thing is that EO thinks that they can sink Protestant theology ship. And to be objective, I personally think Kabane won those other debates between Matt Slick and Anthony Rogers because they didn't answer his fundamental objection, or his counter, I guess you could say, which was that justification is a metaphor for relational stuff. All the legal stuff is a metaphor related to relational stuff and tied to the temple imagery. I don't feel like any of them answered that, or if they did, they didn't emphasize it. And as far as Anthony Rogers bringing all those church quotes up, I think Energetic Procession, who did a 5-hour evaluation of those quotes, which I copied down and I will examine in the future for myself, basically argued that those people were not actually saying faith alone at that time. So I'm really conservative when it comes to quoting from church fathers things. So, all right. So this is the typical Eastern Orthodox strategy. I think Catholics use this strategy. I think that David Preston tried using this strategy. And I think it was God's providence that allowed me to debate him to help me prepare for other debates related to this issue. So EO basically asked this question: where was someone justified by faith alone in the Bible, right? So the Protestant says Romans 4, and then Romans 4 is quoting Genesis 15:6. It quotes other things, but Genesis 15:6. So the EO fires back and says, they may not use this language, but Kabane may use it in this debate. That's not positional justification. And then still, you got to deal with the legal metaphor. It needs to be interpreted. Okay. EO thinks if it can prove disprove the interpretation of Genesis 15:6 as positional, it will cause you to jump ship and jump onto their ship, possibly. So the question is Eastern Orthodox a worthy ship, or does free grace have greater explanatory power? And of course, I will be arguing that free grace has greater explanatory power. So this is from the Christian framework that I was talking about earlier. This is a negative example. And so this is in general, and we'll relate it to EO in a minute. Unbelief swallows up a bit of the word of God. So basically what happens is if you share a portion of the word of God, that's the yellow spot right there, and you present it to people that are in unbelief of various forms in certain areas, or wrong doctrine in certain areas, what happens is unbelief reinterprets the word of God within its own categories. And essentially, this would be the example. So that's the whole thing, is that whenever Protestants are bringing up these legal arguments from the Bible, Eastern Orthodox is reinterpreting that within their own categories. Okay. So here's a positive example, at least from my standpoint. Free grace is no amoeba here. And I believe that free grace is going to swallow up the Eastern Orthodox arguments. I believe that the majority of the things that Eastern Orthodox think matter concerning salvation can be explained by free grace, and so basically the issue is what does EO have to offer that free grace doesn't have to offer? That's the kind of underlying tone that I'm going with here. For example, if you haven't read Final Destiny by Jody Dillow, you're not ready to have a free grace debate discussion with me or Eli. Okay. Maybe you watching Wilkin or Being or some of those others will help you a little bit. But when you're debating me, I'm typically operating from more of the Final Destiny paradigm, which is interesting because it's called a partner paradigm. Okay. See, and then in addition to that, as a dispensationalist, I like biblical theology just like Kabane does. And in biblical theology, this quote at the bottom, it says second, it refers to human partners in God's plan. So here's my point. Eastern Orthodox emphasizes participation with God, or maybe even in God, they would say. Well, like I said, free grace has the explanatory power, and both of these sources are free grace. And if they read and study these, they will see that we have explanations for those things. Now, Elliot Johnson kind of used some more of the four-pointer conservative arguments, and Dillow sometimes he will have some of those, and I go a little bit further than Dillow, but you will see and start thinking in light of understanding where I'm coming from. So the issue is both of us are going to be arguing about process in this debate. But what is this process of? The Eastern Orthodox, who's Sub-Zero, is going to say that it's the process of salvation. But Free Grace, who's Scorpion, is going to be saying it's the process of sanctification. So while this looks like a shadow match or a mirror match, the reality is we're two different entities with different moves, okay? So as part of my preparation, I'm using the resources that I have. For those that want to see, I mean, I could do this with Reform. I could do this with different things. I do such a thing called Logos Snowball and all this and everything. But you can see how much Orthodox packages I have, okay? And I don't think your typical debater or academic is going to have stuff not in their theological tradition, okay? This right here that you're looking at, these are lectures that I bought from Kabane that he sells about answering Protestants and answering Calvinists. This is the one for answering Protestants and everything. Because I wanted to see, I wanted to, his videos help. He's got so much material. I want y'all to know I'm really going to be scratching a dent in Eastern Orthodox. I got a glimpse of the system. I don't think I got everything all figured out. I want y'all to understand that. I've also been reading his book, Christ in All Things. So I have been trying to immerse myself in how Kabane thinks about things, okay? So we've already talked about the mirror match or shadow fight, but the issue is that we got distinct moves. I've studied the moves of Matt Slick and Anthony Rogers, but those moves are not mine, okay? I've studied the moves of the Eastern Orthodox proponents, such as Craig Triglia, whenever he debated Turretin, and I read his blog posts. Kabane's contributions, I already mentioned that. And I can't say this name, Veli Mati Karkanan, maybe. This is in one of the justification counterpoint views or whatever, all 5 views or whatever, and he takes a deification, which is theosis argument. And then Edith Humphrey, this is the mobile ed. As my seminary, I have access to all the mobile ed stuff, and so I studied those, the different views. Protestant Reformed would be D.A. Carson, Matthew Bates for Allegiance Alone. That's the one that Charlie Michaels always wants to argue about. N.T. Wright for New Perspectives, I think it is. And Edith Humphreys, sadly, there's no free grace representation, so I guess I got to do it, But I am trying to convince the Eastern Orthodox, that free grace has what you need to offer, or what free grace has what you need. I think that's the way to say it. But I also want to challenge some Catholics, because the Catholic has never debated me, When you debate me, it's different than debating Dr. Wilkin. Dr. Wilkin is not going to make the arguments that I'm making because he thinks I'm wrong, probably, but I'm trying to push my theories, and so I'm getting the Eastern Orthodox to test them. So if there's a Catholic out there that wants to test it, then by all means, whether that's Dr. Sangenis or anybody else out there. I saw that Trent Horn was making some free grace stuff. saying it's one of the most dangerous doctrines or something like that. I don't know. I was seeing somebody else review that video. So this debate is between really, when we're talking about justification by faith alone, really what's going on in this debate is between, is it a process of salvation or is it a process of experiential sanctification that is in view when these justification passages are brought into play? To oversimplify this, I'm going to do some comparison, and this may be reductionistic, but this is the best frame of reference that I have. I'm going to compare Eastern Orthodox to Church of Christ. Okay, both require repentance for initial justification or salvation. Both require water baptism. One's infant, the other's not. Both require a life of obedience, and both emphasize final justification. Both see experiential sanctification as a condition for final justification. Okay. Oh, how did those need to be reversed. So since I got them like this, I'll say this. I accept the steps in sanctification chart. This is an example of a passage that kind of supports that idea, but I reject the steps of salvation chart. This is the Church of Christ chart. And I used this chart and refuted them because I made this column and showed that belief is positional. Everything else is experiential or prepositional. So the chart defeated the Church of Christ, just as I think the chart defeats Eastern Orthodox. And so the thing is I'm talking about the process of sanctification. Well, we need to clarify this a little bit more. For those that don't know, and there's going to be newcomers. There's going to be people that never have ever heard me debate, never knew about anything free grace, Eastern Orthodox. So I'm trying to make this as friendly as possible to that understanding. So when I'm talking about sanctification, the response of the Orthodox is to say, yeah, but let me disprove that sanctification is a process only. There's a justification process or something like that. Well, who was it that said he don't know me very well? Was it Elmer Fudd or whatever? I don't know. But this is the point. It's Bugs Bunny, I think. I don't know. But so when I'm talking about sanctification, there's actually three aspects of sanctification: positional sanctification, experiential sanctification, and ultimate sanctification. And while we're on the topic, there's three aspects to justification. And I'll go in more detail about these later on. Positional justification, experiential justification, and ultimate justification. And there's three aspects to glorification: positional glorification, experiential glorification, and ultimate glorification. So the argument that Eastern Orthodox and others try to use against the Reformed doesn't work with me, because I already have this stuff nuanced. Unless somebody say, oh, well, you're just trying to nuance it now because you're debating this. Well, you can go back and look at my debates and records, and this stuff's always been here. In fact, you can go back to 5 years ago, even though it already existed before then, and you could see my chart where I'm laying out these issues here on, because I saw years ago that how the Bible was using these differently. It was being used in more than one category. Okay, here's the blow up of the chart if you want to look. So you see justification, sanctification, glorification. All right. So once again, this debate is about, is it a justification by faith related to a process of salvation, or is justification by faith related to a process of experiential sanctification? And related is a loose term, but we'll go with it for now. Okay, so once again, we have position, experience, and ultimate. And here, to clarify, when I used the word salvation a while ago, I do believe that there's three aspects of salvation as well: positional, experiential, and ultimate. But I just make it process of salvation and process of sanctification to simplify it for the audience. And then we can nuance it even more. Now, this chart demonstrates, in my view, the big event, the moment of positional justification happens when you believe the gospel, okay? And then you're seated in the heavenlies. And therefore, because you're seated in the heavenlies, you have a new position in Christ. All of this stuff that happens, this guarantees that you will get a glorified body. And that's why you have this line going all the way across here until you get the glorified body. That's guaranteed. Now, there's little dots right here indicate other times that one is justified experientially in one's life that deals with moral justifications that God does. And they can only occur while you're in fellowship with God. And so experiential sanctification is indicated by the green, okay? So that's keep in mind. But this is how the Eastern Orthodox, the conditional salvationists or conditionalists views it. They have a different chart. Instead of positional, all they can say is initial, okay? I mean, they could say positional, but that would just mean they're falling in and out of a position. But then you ask, how do you maintain your position? And you find out it's a process. So really what that turns into is a process of salvation model, okay? So that's why I'm using the term initial here. So you have initial justification, and I didn't want to have a confusion of a PJ because I use that for positional. So I'm just going to use conditional justification here. Or no, I'm sorry, continual justification. And then you have ultimate justification. So notice the dot is little because they recognize, yeah, there's a moment in time when the process begins. Okay. And but the ultimate thing is what determines whether you go to heaven or hell is the final justification. Okay. So I probably should have made this FJ instead of UJ. But anyway, so one of the difficulties I have is, do I depict justification as a dash, which typically I use for process, or do I depict it as points in time like I did on my chart to indicate that we're talking about events or points in time or activities that God declares as righteous, just. And then therefore the sanctification is just a dash on the green. Okay. So I'm not sure which way Kabane views it, actually. I'm thinking maybe it's more like this one, which would be similar to what I've done, but I don't know. The other factor is that it's almost like you start with your 1% initially justified, but then through theosis, sanctification, you become more and more by going through the sacraments and all this till you get to an ultimate point of justification. You know, I don't know if this is accurate, but this is what I'm going to use to open up the discussion. So when we're talking about justification more in detail, it's positional forensic justification and versus experiential moral justification. Okay. And there's more that can be said about this. If this is pressed in the debate, if it's refuted in the debate, I'll go into more detail about it to nuance it more and everything. But I'm not really going to put a lot of emphasis on this if it's not needed. Okay. So Kabane has a 60-second short video, something like what Protestants get wrong about justification or something. Can't remember the exact title. I mentioned it in other videos and everything. I'm getting kind of lightheaded. It's water. So, and in his teaching and in his debates, he brought this up. So I feel like I need to hit this on head on. It's such an important argument to Kabane that I may have to cut out so many things in my debate prep. I mean, in my debate presentation to make sure I get this in there. But anyway, we're just talking through it right now. Kabane claims that justification is the same way how Jesus was justified. Okay, well, first off, Jesus didn't need positional justification or salvation. Okay, so it can't be describing how one gets positional justified. But he needed to walk in experiential sanctification. Christ did need to walk in experiential sanctification. I've talked about that in other videos. He learned obedience through what he suffered. He's a sinless sacrifice, and the sacrifice was evaluated, tested, if you will, proved it was spotless throughout his life. So the sanctification is comparable to the believer, or comparable, however you want to say it, to the believer. All right. And so this is true that is comparable in the area of experiential justification, because the believer gets experiential justified. Jesus got experiential justified in his walk, as well as ultimate justification, because ultimate justification, in my view, is vindication. It's receiving of rewards. Okay. It's not how you get into heaven. But not so with the Eastern Orthodox. They believe that instead of ultimate justification, it's final justification that's dependent on theosis. See, in my view, experiential sanctification is not dependent on you going to heaven. It does affect rewards, but it's not the same thing, because you got to remember there's two processes. EO is process of salvation. Free grace is process of experiential sanctification. Okay. So to go into more detail, and hopefully I don't even have to do this, but to clarify, Jesus is God. He's eternal, right? So if you want to talk about something positional, you'd have to talk about without ending or without beginning. Now, his incarnation had a beginning, okay? So the point is, Jesus doesn't need positional salvation or positional justification, but the incarnation had a beginning point. So if you want to be the beginning point, the initial of sanctification, then fine. But you're going to have to make a perfect green line, because he never lost fellowship. So Jesus, in his experience as the God-man, was perfectly pleased the Father in everything he did. And I could actually make dots all along the way, yellow dots all along the way, for the way that he was experientially justified. And I got the cross here and all that. So for his faithfulness and his sinlessness. And then he was vindicated when he was bodily resurrected. He ascended, was glorified, and he received as an inheritance a name and all of that. So rewards. So you see this, the only connection is he's the model of sanctification for us. This is not about salvation. Okay. So when we're talking about this justification by faith alone debate, we got to talk about the slogan of the Reformation assumes that alone is an adjective. In other words, they think that alone is modifying faith. But actually, the correct way is that that alone should be modifying justification. So it would be something like, we are only justified by faith. Okay. Theologically, I believe in justification by faith alone, right? And what I mean by that is one believes for eternal life to become regenerated. So this is an ontological positional transformation. And then there's a forensic positional transformation, in that your account was minus R and now it's plus R. And it's one way to put it. With the positionally imputedness of Christ's righteousness. Okay. Now, I'm not going to argue this imputation of Christ's righteousness in the same way that Slick or Anthony Rogers does. And so that may get fleshed out in the debate. Positional justification is God's declaration that one is positionally righteous based on Christ's righteousness. This is my theological position, okay? So, but the question is, in this debate, you got to be thinking about, is justification ever positional? Is righteousness ever positional in the Bible? Is imputation ever positional in the Bible? You know, and then we got the issue about the covenant relationship. You know, this is where you plug in some of the stuff from the new perspectives on Paul. Could justification mean just participating in the covenant, the Abrahamic covenant in particular? The Eastern Orthodox wants to take a transformation of life view, okay? So from Craig Triglia on the Orthodox doctrine of justification, this is what he says. He says, Protestants argue that one is justified by faith alone. The Catholic argues that we're justified by faith and good works. The Eastern Orthodox, he says, argues is that it's works enhanced faith that actually saves. And we're going to break this down more, and I've done it in other videos. But so he goes into the English meaning of justification and declared just in a court of law, and said that there's the issue of one that's being perceived as just, which is vindicated in other sight, or one in which one is actually just in their dealings are fair. So here's a comparison I tried of the two systems. And I don't know how clear this is, but I'll try it. So we got the order right here. And I think what I mean by order is I got Eastern Orthodox, I got Lordship, I got the normal order by which how I discuss this issue. I got conditionalists here, and I got free grace here. So then you have the phrase that Triglia used, work enhanced faith really saves. So the Eastern Orthodox sees works enhanced, and I think it's experiential, it's theosis. It's part of the process of salvation. Then they see faith, and that includes initial faith, and it includes continual faith. And then really saves, they take it to mean final justification, which for them, ironically, is positional. They put the positional on the other side, if you will. So you got to go through all this process to get to a position. Lordship, okay, they would understand the phrase works enhanced. They would say in James 2 that a dead faith, so it needs to be works enhanced. And then the question is, can that faith, right, they would assume it's positional, or even experiential faith, sorry, can that faith save? And so they it relates to ultimate salvation in the sense of like final justification, you could say, or they would say that if the position is proven by that. But if you put this in the normal order that I use, position, experience, and ultimate, this is what you see. The conditionalists will argue, okay, that initial faith, right? This is where I'm putting things in order. The initial faith, instead of positional, is small, right? Then you have continual faith, or I even put the theosis stuff in here. And then you have the gigantic ball of final justification, because that's what really matters. Then you have free grace. Free grace position, you have positional faith that results in a gift. So that's a huge ball. Experiential faith results in rewards. So that shows that they're different because they have different results. And then ultimate is right here, getting the glorified body and things like that. So James 2 properly understood, works enhanced faith really saves. So this is the point. They're saying experiential works that enhance positional and experiential faith. Really, and so this is the free grace view. It really saves one from divine judgment at the judgment seat of Christ. Okay, maybe I need to clarify that. I need to do work on that slide because I was attempting to do two different things at once. And I wasn't really weighing in on this right here when it came to the free grace part. But I'll work on that. Okay. Really saves from the divine judgment. Because what's going on is they have a sinful attitude of prejudice and the activity of discrimination. But Eastern Orthodox misinterpret James 2 and apply it to their whole view of salvation. So in other words, the reason they have a process of salvation is because they took a passage that was focusing on the process of experiential sanctification. So they're saying it's salvation by process, a journey to final justification. But we got to remember this. God positionally and so the conservative thesis is Romans 4:5. God positionally justifies the ungodly as the ungodly. So one does not become godly before being justified. We've got to keep that argument in mind. It's not the regenerated or united life that is declared righteous. Rather, it's the righteousness of God that is declared righteous. that comes through faith in Christ, that God declares as positionally righteous. That is positional justification. So the question is, how could the ungodly become positionally justified? Well, they don't become godly before being positionally justified. Romans 4:5, God justifies the ungodly. Romans 4:5. Christ died for the ungodly. 5:6. While we were helpless. 5:6. While we were yet sinners. 5:8. While we were God's enemies. 5:10. We were dead because of our sins. Ephesians 2:5. So does this refer to initial justification? Do these passages refer to final justification? Or do these passages refer to experiential justification? Okay. So here's some of the main passages that are typically brought up about Abraham, and I'm making the argument in the theoretical thesis that all refer to experiential justification. And so you have pre-salvation, salvation, sanctification, glorification right here. And so I don't have any for salvation, as you see. All of them are for sanctification. Then these are some comparisons. I've done this in other videos, so I'm not going to go into it. Comparisons between Psalms 32, which is experiential, James 2, experiential, Galatians 3, experiential, Romans 4, experiential, and same thing with the second part. Then I got all the arguments, I think of Tregelia, that he made, and you see that I put everything in the experiential category that he brought up concerning justification and other things like that. Now, I'm willing to move some of these to another category, but I don't think Kabane is going to convince me to move any. Let's see. So here's some other stuff, if I wanted to get into objective or subjective genitive and other things like this. This is just extra stuff. I probably won't even use this slide. We'll see. So these are older slides when I was kind of trying to articulate that issue there. Some people describe theosis as progressive glorification or Christification, and even people that are Protestants are using that language. So there I am dealing with this issue of vindication and all of that. This is where, okay, Joshua 24, if you want to make that positional, and you got 12, Genesis 12, 15, 17, 22, 21. And you got the different passages that relate to Hebrews 11 and all that. And I'm basically arguing that they're all experiential. De jure versus de facto status, about being in an error. If I need that. And then there's all the word group study stuff. And I've already gone through all that in previous videos, I think. So I'm exhausted. I didn't have much energy, but I got to hype myself up. I got to hype y'all up. So anyway, if y'all been blessed by this video, subscribe, hit the bell to get notifications so that you don't miss up on future content. Share this with others so that they can benefit from it. Give us a thumbs up to help with the algorithm purposes. Most of all, keep this ministry in prayer. Pray for the debate, in particular the hearers and also the presenters. And if you would like to donate, in other words, if you feel like God's blessed you through the ministry, there's a PayPal link underneath the About section and underneath most videos. And there's also other options that I think YouTube provides for that, like super chats or whatever. But I don't know if you can donate those on non-live stuff. Anyway, God bless, guys.